doing screencasting and things like that. Live shit. OBS is so good. Yeah, I mean,
It's simple to use.
Which one?
OBS.
What is it?
It's some broadcasting system or something like that.
Because I've been trying to look at some others and you can do a 7-day trial and stuff.
I wanted to pay for it anyway. But I mean, it does the job, and in my opinion, that's all it needs to do. But it does it really easily. You just press a button, this is fine, and you can actually like add stuff on top of it. All sorts of
Because
stuff.
you add, add screen cap or the front camera, and then you add it, and then it asks you stuff, what you want to do.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's added. You don't have to do some weird.
What's it?
What is it? Please.
Yeah, sure.
You should turn off your sound.
Yes.
What time?
7:20 almost.
Where's my phone? Yeah.
So how much pizza we should have?
Plus, what's that person?
And where should we order?
They won't know how you turned up.
You still have
So you can avoid that by doing reconciliation of a number and see if the fact of non-conjugation. But then you have to figure out how to work this like a
So with live,
correct starting.
Yeah.
live with audio.
Yes.
I think so, yes.
Load the pattern. You have to
Can we just go down another end and check?
or you need to communicate with your user style.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
You guys, everybody?
No, wait, 10 minutes?
Who's in favor of pizza or something else? Okay, both pizza and.
Whatever you choose to feed us.
Yeah, maybe.
Pizza simple, that's it.
So,
Is anybody vegetarian or allergic to something? Any allergies? Are you vegetarian?
Yeah. Pizza, I can pick up the
We have a colleague once, he told us,
Project Nick.
you can order whatever you want, but
Yes.
not nothing vegetarian. So we want everything just with meat.
that is just bone.
Oh, yes.
I'm perfectly happy to eat meat also. The price and concern any
It's just you know,
when I go to this campaign, I avoid having like only one episode, but then you don't have any option. And the rest of us can eat for you. So the way yesterday, I went to a vegan restaurant. It was a Thai vegan, and the last thing that it has a bad eye for the pros were vegans. And they were so incredibly spirally and with the white with red on top.
Yeah, especially it's like pastry artistry, which is got a sauce in it. Something else.
Yeah, actually, the sauce. It was with the guy who was
Yes.
vegan, that's lettuce. And yes, it was very convincing. It's so amazing and the prawns. It was in box parking shortages. Why you set up? I hadn't seen before upstairs. They have made small units where they have restaurants, and then in the middle, the areas you go with the speaker, for example. You can actually go to the fourth place, but you see in the picnic tables. So it's pretty well. It's covered, so it's pretty fine.
People just taking a lot of time. People just, No, Jamie has some family things. That's fine. It's good news. I'm just trying to get it working with the Ember at the moment. So,
getting that ready price to heavy yellow, white heavy yellow.
We do.
And my fancy one was based on the background, which the rest are I think London is taking as well. Still living in that. Still living very. This is actually the size of
absolutely based on his app on it. It's one of the huge applications. All of it is the pages all the time.
And they try and then that's not the best way to do it. Do it again.
Sorry.
I took me a while to figure it out.
There's any documentation because there is
Try
no the green way.
You made it. Wow. How much? How's the project going?
That's like the same as I
If you want to enter.
Another check? Are you another check?
No, that's fine. Alright, I'm going to take this one.
I remember the first 16.
You may have a seat. You may want to also. Sorry. I need to. Do you know what the No? May I have your attention? No? We're going to start.
And the thing that yields it has
Number 6.
Sit down.
Sit down!
Okay. Okay.
Anybody want to drink before we begin?
So look. Okay.
It's completely different when there's no light outside.
Yes.
Last time it was like full light.
Okay.
For some of these ideas.
Okay. We're about to start. Tonight's going to be a live coding session. Both Sam and I will code, and if anyone wants to follow what we do on their own laptops, the base repo we're going to use is the one on the slides. You can clone it, you can install whatever you want, because it's going to be like I estimate 40 minutes presentation, when we're going to basically migrate the entire application to 3 different engines, all of them lazy loaded. So it's an easy process. Actually, it's embarrassingly easy, too easy. So we can start. This is me, Miguel. This is Sam.
Hi.
We want to thank Shoma Homework for providing food, venue, and everything needed for this night.
Woo! Full disclosure. We want full disclosure.
Okay. Food is coming. Don't be nervous. Okay. First of all, I'm going to start the presentation This is also an Ember Engines 101. I want to explain a little bit where engines are and why I think they are cool. First of all, what are the engines? The basic concept of an engine is not much different if you know the concept from Rails. It's an application that lives within another application. So it's a way, I mean, this is the basic definition. You have an application living within another application. Why this is a good idea instead of having only one? One of the advantages is having a different application allows you to encapsulate some part of the logic within an entity that is standalone. It has no communication with the main app except for very defined points, basically through services, in short. And so you can develop and test in isolation, even if you have different teams. Different teams can work on different applications, so they don't step into each other's toes. And if lazy loaded, it also allows your application to be downloaded as a pay-as-you-go. So you enter a section and you download what you need for that section. And if you then click on another engine, you load the things you need only when you actually request that area. Second question that is probably going to arise very soon is, are they production ready? Ish. They are already being used in production by some people, mainly, by example, LinkedIn is the main pusher of this technology and also sponsoring many of the development. And they are already using lazy engines in production in the mobile application, and it works like a charm. And British Gas here in London is also using engines, not lazy, but they are reusing entire sections of from one application to another. I think billing, all the billing things is using several applications. They just extract an engine and they add the engine in several places and it works. It's a technology that is still in flux, is in beta, so there is some kirks to iron, things that are not yet as nice as they could be, but it's moving very fast and it's going to be there soon. Requirements for this demo, in case you want to do it at home. It requires at least Ember 2.8 for the migration to engines, and unless I stand corrected, I think they require Ember Beta plus Ember Engines, the 0.4 branch, because the cycle they're following right now is there is a stable branch, 0.3 whatever, which has engines implemented without lazy loading, and the 0.4 branch is for lazy loading and requires Ember Beta. Works happen as we speak, so using the latest version of everything is advised, because this usage of engines is discovering things that can be improved in the build pipeline. So Ember CLI it's receiving some improvements to accommodate the existence of engines. So they can be cached on its own. You can split the assets in many places. So again, this is actually a technology that, given the tight integration between Ember and Ember CLI, it actually touches not only Ember and the add-on, it touches Ember, the build pipeline, and also many add-ons will have to adapt to this technology. So it's a work that it has to be done by us, by the framework authors, by the people building the pipeline. They probably will find edge cases in Broccoli that have to be, if not fixed, at least improved. So being up to date is nice. And we're going to code. So Sam, if you want to type.
Yeah.
We have the application already here, and we're going to go through the app and let you type. So one of us is going to type and the other one is going to explain what's going on. So first of all, let's run the application. So Ember S. Let's go to Chrome. The application is pretty simple. It has 3 sections. Let's Let's this thing load. Are we in the right branch, by the way? Command D.
You're on master.
Yes, master. Okay. So this application, it takes you to a page that has a select that does nothing, but is there because you will see why it's there. There is also a teacher section where you can see some teachers, and if you click the see classes, you can select or see the detail of the class, and if you go inside, you can see even more details of this thing. Similar with parents, you have parents, you can click on show meetings, and you see that parents are going to have meetings with some teachers in some classrooms. And in students, it's pretty much the same thing. You have another area, and as you see, they happen to be entirely independent. They don't share, and they are on the different routes, and this is the pattern that you see. This entire section of the page can be extracted into an engine. So you don't download, by example, the teacher's area until you actually enter the teacher's area. So it's a pay-as-you-go idea. So let's see the routes of the main application, router, sorry. This is the router application. And we're going to start extracting the first one, the teacher's area. So what we're going to do, first of all, is install Ember engines. For that, we just need to run Ember install Ember-engines at the version we want, in this case 0.4.0 beta 3, if I'm correct, .3. It should take a moment, and we are going to restart the server after the installation. And we're going to create our first engine by running the command ember g in repo engine, because we can create an engine as a standalone add-on. But in our case, we want to create it within this application because it's not really something we want to share with anyone, and for demo purposes it's simpler. And we are going to give it a name, in this case, teacher's engine. You see that this thing creates inside lib the files necessary for this engine to run. So can you restart this server, because it's going to, otherwise it's not going to pick changes inside the lib folder. Let's go to the code. And you see that now in the router, automatically we have a this.mount, the teacher's engine. By default, when you create an engine, it's going to be mounted on a route with the same name. But in this case, we want to replace this thing. We want to replace with this engine this entire section. So we are going to comment this area entirely. And we're going to mount this engine on the same route. So we're going to do as an object with options, as teachers. And now this engine is replacing the other section. It's going to be addressed under /teachers.
Why as instead of at?
Yes, you can do both. In this specific case, it's identical. But imagine you have an engine that is, for example, a blog post, and you want to mount the same engine 3 times under different routes. Mm-hmm. But so you have to give it a different name every time, because for configuration purposes, the same engine may be embedded in 3 different routes, but with different configuration for every instance. So you can give it a name. So the same engine, teacher's engine, can be aliased as many as 3 different names. In this case, if you can add path teachers, and it's going to be identical.
So path only allows you to mount to a single point, but as lets you mount to multiple points. Or
the thing is, if you don't pass as, don't give the engine an alias.
Yeah.
If you want to configure the engine on a per instance basis, you don't have a way to address this specific engine because you don't have a unique name within your app.
So that's not creating a sort of virtual root, that's just naming the engine.
is given an alias to the engine, and it happens that the alias by default also determines the URL.
So you can put path as well, put a different path.
Yes, if, for example, if you add path, and instead of teachers we say tutors, for example, it's going to be alias as teachers and mounted within the /tutors URL. So yes, ask.
Then teacher there is a name that you are going to use later somewhere else to refer to it in order to configure.
Yes. If you want to configure the engine, you can use this name. In this specific case, we are not going to give any particular. Well, in this case, it doesn't make any sense to, or we don't have any reason to use the name, because we don't want to give. We are not going to have two different instances of the same teacher engine. We are going to have one. So in this case, we could use path, and it would be identical. I mean, because for the purposes of this talk, we don't need this feature.
Actually, if you were to use path, later to refer to it, you will probably have to use the name teacher's engine.
Yes, and it's the name we are going to use. So let's start going to this route and see if it works. So open the DevTools and let's see something that I like. First of all, I want to disclaimer. I'm not an expert in engines. The first time I did this was 2 days ago. So I feel prepared to give the talk because actually it's so simple that my hope is that you actually see this thing and say, oh, this is boring. This is too easy to be true. But it happens to be that easy, at least the surface. There is some kinks, as I mentioned, but the basic is this. So if we click on teachers, it works. Nothing renders because the template is empty, but we are rendering already the engine. So if we go to the template,
So if we look at the network, would we see that the new JavaScript?
No, because it's not lazy yet.
It's not lazy yet.
At the moment we have an engine, but it's not lazy. So let's go to the template. Sorry, we are here, and we see that inside add-on templates, we have the application template and it's empty. It has an outlet. So what we want to have is we want to copy the routes that we have in our application inside this engine and remove them from the application. Go with templates, we go to the teachers area, and this teachers HBS now is going to become the application HBS of our teachers engine. So we can copy the content inside, remove the original file, and now if we reload, we should have inside the teachers area, we have something, teachers. Let's now move the rest of the files. So now we can drag and drop actually, because the rest of the files are going to be almost identical. We go here and we just copy everything inside teachers to our add-on templates. There you have. We are going to also, okay. We are also going to copy we can delete the folder, it's true. We are going to copy also the teachers routes. We are going to drag this folder into add-on, and we're going to rename it as routes. And we're going to do the same thing with controllers. We're going to drag the folder, and we're going to rename it as controllers. And more or less we are done, actually, creating an engine. Let's see what the failures are. Okay, can we restart? Because probably Broccoli sometimes goes mad when some file disappears and appears in some other place. Let's reload. And now we have an error, and we are going to see why we have this error and how to solve it. The first error we have is that we are trying to access the store, and our engine doesn't have a store. The store is a service provided by the main application, but we need to declare some contract between the engine and the host application. So for that, we need to open the documentation in Ember engines, because we are going to actually copy the exact example. And the way we do that is an engine must declare its dependencies, and the application must declare the same dependencies and to what object or service or route match on those dependencies match on the host application. So in the case of the engine, we need to declare dependencies like this way. We declare dependencies and we list the services from the main application that we want to use. So we are going to copy this small piece of code and paste it inside the engine. This is the engine JS. It's more or less equivalent to the application JS on the main app, but it has a different name. But it's used for declaring how the application it builds. And now we need to go to the app.js to fill the counterpart in the application. So we go to the app.js and we paste the dependencies. So we add an engines key that lists the engines, and we are going to name it in case an engine is even if the name of the engine is with dashes, in here is with capital case. And we want to paste not this. We want to paste not routes but services, because it's the thing we declare on the other side.
What's the name teachers engine and not teachers as you put as teachers?
I believe that in this case I could say use both, because I have aliased. But in this case, since I have only one instance, both will work.
So you can inject different services in two aliases for the same engine?
Yes, if we have so many instances of the same names, I have to address them by the alias.
I have an idea. Maybe, I have no idea if this is the case, but maybe by using that name, the configuration will apply to all engines. If you were to mount the same engine several times, maybe using that.
This configuration is global, and the configuration you address by the alias is unique to this instance?
Maybe.
Maybe. As I said, I did this 2 days ago, so.
Fair enough. It's an
Probably.
idea.
Let's try again. So it's still failing. Why? We have injected the service, but in our routes, we are referring to the store as this.store. This is a kind of magical thing in that routes have this property, but in engines you have to be explicit and use inject service to get the object. So we are going to do inject. We are going to get the service by the name, and we're going to we have to use this.getStore instead of this.store. This.getStore over there, and let's do the same thing in all the routes.
In light of that change, would you recommend referring to the store as with a get by default?
I do. I refer to the store as this.getStore, usually. Not because of engines, just because I kind of like to access the things always the same way. I used to use get everywhere, so I use get here as well.
I have always felt that was a bit of a strange hack.
It is a hack. Actually, even if you don't have Ember data, all routes have a store property that is magical and has a find method that does nothing. So, funny stories. Let's see if it works now. So now we have a different error. It's because power select is not there. Please. It's obvious that it's going to be there. So you can see that engines happens to have their own package.json, because engines may have to declare their own dependencies. In this case, we're going to declare Ember power select as a dependency of our engine, so it can be found.
So in this non-lazy method, is there any way to share the actual JavaScript?
You have to, I mean, in this case it's going to be shared, but you have to explicitly decide this depends on this. This engine depends on this add-on.
Actually, maybe it's a better question, say, in lazy loading, because the module when it's being loaded lazily doesn't know necessarily what other dependencies already exist in the browser environment.
Roughly does.
Roughly does, yeah.
No, in this case, well, the thing is, everything you want to use has to be explicitly listed in the package.json. Even if you are not in lazy mode, you have to list it there. Because the engine is entirely isolated. So there has absolutely no knowledge of the host application, and except for the manifest we saw before, where you declare dependencies, and on the other side you also do the counterpart in the application. So let's see if it renders now. It does render, and now we have another error saying that teachers.teacher. There is a lot of teachers there. This route doesn't exist. Why? We have a link. Let's find the link inside the teacher template where we have teachers.teacher.class. But now we are inside the engine, and this engine is named teachers. So the first segment is redundant. We don't need that. We can remove it. It should reload. We have another link like that.
No.
This one. Let's see if now it works. Teachers.teacher. Look for that on the entire project because there might be some more than one. There, and it's not route name that, and teachers.teacher. What is that?
Nope.
Can you restart in case there is a brain fart? Live coding. Okay, and maybe it tells you where? Route recognizer. Okay, I think I know why. We haven't declared the routes of the engine. So we commented the routes on the router of the application, and those routes have to be now defined inside the engine. So the engine has its own routes. Actually, funny or interesting fact, the routes on build time are actually promoted to the parent application, because the parent application has to have knowledge of all the routes of the application, so it can deep link into the engine, even if the engine has not been loaded in lazy mode. So routes get promoted to the parent app in build time. So now we have the engine working for entire section. We can see the classes, show the details, and we see this thing. So we have our first engine. We're going to do the same thing with the next. Let's go. We're going to generate a new engine. Same process. And we're going to call it, in this case, what do we do, teachers or?
Students.
Okay, students engine. And let's do the same thing. In this case, we're going to alias this thing as students. And comment this. We're going to copy the route inside to the new router inside the engine. We don't need to copy the surrounded route because that's the engine itself. So they only need to copy the things inside. We can delete this thing, we can delete the previous one as well. And now we are going to do the same process. We're going to copy the template students, we're going to copy everything inside the application SVS of the engine, and we're going to drag and drop the templates inside this thing. I think we can delete now this. Delete this. We are going to drag also the routes and the controllers. Rename. Now this is the routes. Same with controllers. That's the part I hope it's boring, which is if building something complicated is boring, it's a good thing. Okay, and let's reload. I don't know if we need to, yes, we need to restart the server after creating every engine. Now let's go to the students engine, and it's failing because of the same thing. We need the store. So let's copy the. In this case, is DDD development driven. It's every time you do something. Actually, the error messages in the console are pretty good, and at every point in time they tell you what is going on. In this case, they'll tell you that there is no such a thing. There is not. It can't find the service.
Cons.
It can find the store, and you know that it can find the store because it's a service, and the service that you need to declare explicitly. Let's copy the same thing in all the other route. And I know what's going to happen, so this engine also uses Ember select, so we're going to also copy the dependency into the package JSON of the engine. You need to declare the services. Yes. Same thing, go to the engine and let's copy the previous one because it's identical. And let's go to the application, JavaScript, and duplicate the same thing for the new engine. And in this case is students. Let's copy the Ember Power Select into the package.json. There it is. So let's reload. You need to restart after changes in the package.json. You realize that in this case, since it's already installed, we don't need to install it again. You need to declare it, but it's using the same copy.
An engine has a service of its own.
Sorry?
An engine has a service internally within the engine.
Yes.
And you load it twice. Is that two separate singletons, or do they share the same singleton?
What do you mean with loading twice? Because you mean...
Say the engine itself loads the store. The outer application doesn't have data.
Okay.
So the engine says, I've got an internal store service. If you mount that twice, you get two store services.
Yes, the stores will be independent. If you have two engines and they don't use the service provided by the parent app, they have their own copy. Which I guess it could be useful, and by some real use case that I think it's going to be interesting is if you're using Ember Simple Auth and you have a session, you may want to have a second login for a more private area. So you can have a session within the engine and the session from the outside the engine, and they have different sessions, so you can keep a different copy. So this small square in the bottom corner has a login screen, and you log in there, and it's entirely different sessions. You probably need to configure like using a different key on local storage or using a different cookie, but you could do it. So does it work?
No, because
you need to. Oh, okay, we have another add-on. So Power Calendar. And there is something interesting here is that our calendar happens to only be used inside this engine. It's not used outside this engine. So instead of copying it, we're going to delete it from the main one. We're going to kill the server, start again. Same problem. We have nested routes, so we need to remove the first segment of the route because we're redundant now. So everything that is students dot, it goes away. We have another route without any link. Okay, only one. Let's see if it works. Yes, and if we enter the homework, it does work. We have some homework there too. So latest engine, and this engine has a small difference, so it's going to be more interesting. The engine we're going to create now, the parents engine, happens to have links that cross the boundary of the engine because there has a link to the teacher's area. So this is the main difference with this engine. Let's create it. Same command, Ember new report engine, and with a different name, in this case, parents. And let's repeat the process. Let's copy the application HBS. And first of all, let's give it a name. Let's comment the routes and copy the one in the middle, the parent route. Let's paste it inside the routes of the engine. I guess that you catch the rhythm. So copy the template, drag the appropriate folders, everything inside. Well, in this case, you need to drag not the content. You need to drag the parent and the index. We need to drag the routes and rename it. Same thing with controllers, and it's the latest one. Controllers. We're going to go faster, so now we're going to, we know the jazz, so we're going to copy power select and duplicate everything. Let's just start duplicating the configuration for this one. Parents, same thing inside the engine. We open the engine and we copy the configuration, so we request the application to give us the store service. Now we copy the dependency, and power select is also used inside this add-on, inside this engine. Down. Here. And let's go to the templates and let's remove the initial dot parents dot on every route. So, why do we have teachers? Oh no, sorry, this is fine. This is the cross boundary area. So inside the index we have a parents.parent, in this case it's just parent. And
one more thing.
Let's restart. No, the store is true. Store. Const, let's inject the store explicitly on the route.
Start the game.
Thank you.
Oh.
Mac. No, the store actually service.
Checking if you guys are paying attention.
And let's copy all the lines, including the route definition. This, yes. In here, same thing. This dot get the store. And I think probably we need to restart. cross fingers. Let's go to parents. It does work. And now let's enter one of the parents. And it fails. Why? Because there is no route named parents.teacher. Sorry, it doesn't know this route because this route points to a URL that it doesn't belong to the engine. To access routes to access from within an engine, a route that is outside the engine, you need to use a different helper. You need to use the link to external. And also, you need to define, there is another one here. Also, you need to define the routes you want to access from the parent application, and the parent application has to provide you the routes you want. Exact same thing as with the services. So let's check the documentation for that. There is an example over there. This is one, external routes. You need to list what you want, and the application has to provide what you want. So this is from within the engine, or this is from the app. So inside the application, on the parents engine, inside dependencies, you want to provide the external routes. And in this case, we want to provide, we're going to name it, at this point, we can alias anything we want, because given that engines are entirely isolated, there is a chance that this route can collision with something outside. So the idea is, in here you can give it an alias. We're going to, instead of calling it teachers.teacher, I'm going to call it teachers-details. Teacher in singular dash details, and the second route and points to teachers.teacher. And the second route we're going to share, I'm going to call it teachers.details.class, because I want to point to the class inside this specific teacher. And it's going to point to teachers.teacher.class. And this is the mapping. I created this alias. And now in the engine, I'm going to receive those alias. Same way.
So I guess every individual route, you can't just say, I guess, the top level route.
No, you need to be independent. Actually, only the thing you list is accessible, and if you have a top level route and a route that is nested 3 levels, the thing in between, the second level, is not reachable to you. You need to be very explicit with this. You need to go to the engine and declare the dependencies on the other side.
Does the router have to navigate to?
Yes, there is also a transition to external. There is the link to external and the transition to external method on the routes, and also on the controllers, I think. So let's go to the engine JavaScript file. And let's declare here the external dependencies the same way. Here. And in here we just need to list the values, because so we're going to call it teachers details and teachers details.class. Let's fix our links so they point to this to these routes instead of the existing ones. Yes, and I think this should work. Let's try. It works. No errors. And if we click on these links, we go to the other engine. Ta-chang. This is all when it comes to migrating to engines. Now we're going to make the engines lazy. So what do we need to make the engines lazy? By default, all the engines are not lazy, so working class, I guess. And we just need to enable the lazy flag. So the lazy flag is enabled on the index.js of every engine, and make it this thing lazy is as simple as saying lazy loading, column, true, that's it. And it's lazy. Let's go.
before you do that, what's the point of a non-lazy engine? What's the value of non-lazy engine?
Isolation, testability, shareability as well.
On a given atom.
Sorry?
On a given atom.
The difference between an engine and an atom is blurry. My view of the subject is that if something is complex enough to have flows within itself, it's probably that you want to make it an engine, because it will have its own routes, it's reachable, because it's serialized on the URL as well. Again, imagine you have an engine that happens to be a login process with several a multi-step form that serializes state on the URL. It's complex enough to deserve to have a router and behave as a router. So go to lib and open all the engines.
Do engines show up on Ember Observer or?
They are regular Ember add-ons. So I expect them to show if someone actually published an engine. The classical use case of engines, for example, there is an add-on named Ember Admin, I think, which is the classical CRUD interface for any resource. That's the perfect use case of an engine, because you want this thing to be mounted into an application, and suddenly you have access to doing create, update, delete operations on the models you have. That's simple. And it's the perfect use case for an engine that is easy to share. I guess that it's not very common to have engines available publicly, because probably they're going to be specific to for your use case. But this is an example of an engine that can be widely available and useful. So we need to go to the index JavaScript, not the engine.
Sorry, Miguel, I have a question.
Yes.
The pizza is here.
Okay, that's not a question. That's an ultimatum. So this is very fast, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to do lazy loading true, lazy loading true, lazy loading true in all the engines. Let's do. No need of quotes.
Oh.
True in all of them. There. And the latest one. Let's kill the server. Start again. Go to the application. Let's remove any path. So we are here on the root. Reload. And this is interesting. We are focusing the JavaScript part of the application, and we can see that we have downloaded the vendor JavaScript and the Show My Homework block, because it's the name of the app. And when I click on teachers, tachan, we are loading this area. And if I click on parents, we keep loading more JavaScript. And if I click on the students, we keep loading more JavaScript. And if you see the size, something to take into account, you see that the vendor JavaScript has 39K, 39K, and this is 48K. This is because this is more or less the size and compressed of Ember Browser Select and Ember and all the dependencies, wormhole, Ember concurrency. And this is a bit bigger because also includes the calendar. So its vendor JavaScript includes the dependencies of this engine, and so you can download things as you navigate. And that comes. I mean, this is all. I mean, now we have lazy engines, and we can deploy this thing, and it's going to work, which is nice because it has been slightly boring because it's very mechanical. It works very well. You enable lazy loading, and you have lazy loading. What is next to explain here? We have an application, and the application ended up being this way. We have an application with teachers, students, and parents engines. We have a global vendor JavaScript, and each engine has its own vendor JavaScript. The thing is, since, for example, Ember Browser Select is a dependency of all of them, at the moment it's duplicated. So it's inside here, it's inside here, it's inside here, and since it's also on the main application, it's outside any engine, is here. That means you are loading it twice. in the worst case scenario, you're loading here, 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 and here. So you're loading it 4 times actually. This work being done for being able to dedupe copies of the engine and promote them to the parent application. So in this case, Ember select happens to be in everywhere. So if you declare in the future, if you declare Ember select as a dependency of your main application, it should be only included once. Problem is, at the moment, applications can only share with engines, services, and routes. There is not yet a way of the sharing components. So this is something that probably has to be ironed before it's fully useful. So this is the main problem I found so far. Add-on duplication. It's not yet possible to share add-ons between shell app and the engines inside. Usually, depending on the use case, it's not that big of a problem because, for example, in our case, when we eventually implement engines in Show My Homework, people don't transition from one engine to another, because if you're a parent, you go to the parent's engine, and if you're a teacher, you go to the parent engines. So in our specific use case, this duplication is not a problem because you are never going to navigate between engines. But if we wanted to maybe divide within the teacher's area, one specific area that happens to be yet another engine nested within the engine, that is something where we would have some kind of duplication. So that's something that has to be improved, and people is working on that. I know that. Sharing components, not third-party components as add-ons, your own components. Let's pretend you create a validated input component, which is something very common to do. Your validated input has to be converted into an add-on in order to be included in your components, because what I mentioned, there is no way of sharing components from the parent app to the engines. So that means if you want to migrate an area of your app to engines, every component that is used inside this area, if it's also used outside this area, it has to be promoted to an add-on. It doesn't need to be published. It can be an in-repo add-on within your app, within your project, but it has to be promoted to an add-on in order to be included in both in several engines, or both in the shell application and inside the engine. Also, the ecosystem has to adapt. For example, some problems I have is I couldn't make SAS work inside engines. I have to use regular CSS. With live, actually, remember, we forgot to also do something. Engines can have its own CSS.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Not here. Here. Inside in the application, we see that every area has a different color, and we have 3 classes for that. We have blue box, red box, and green box. Nothing special. So in here, we're going to move these files to CSS files inside the engine. So inside the teachers engines, teachers are, let me remember because I don't remember. Teachers are green, I think. Yes, teachers are green. So I'm going to copy the green box inside new folder, styles, and yes, rename styles, and inside here you can create a file. I'm going to call it teachers.css. The name doesn't matter, it's going to be included. So now Greenbox is inside this engine only. And it still works, or it should work actually. Oh no, it doesn't work because it has this, this is SAS syntax, not, if I do solid green, let's remove this thing. If I make it valid syntax, let's reload. Okay, this is embarrassing. Background color green. Teachers is, I'm going to reload just in case it's because of that. Yes, it is. So now this CSS is not going to be loaded until you load the engine, because it's serving the vendor JavaScript, but if you go to the CSS, it's also serving the vendor CSS. So we have engine JavaScript, and we have we have an engine CSS, an engine JavaScript, a vendor CSS for the engine, and a vendor CSS JavaScript for the engine for every application, and one of the main applications. So we have four assets for every engine. This.
But the CSS isn't namespace, is it?
No, that's the next quirk, or not. It's not any different. The thing I want to mention is this thing. Beware, styles are not, for a lazy add-on, might mess with the top level styles. You need to scope it yourself. So you have a new CSS file coming in, and it will kick in, and these styles are going to be added to the page. If those styles are global, they can mess with the styles of the application. Basically, you can load an engine and suddenly something breaks on the header because you load a class that collides with some other class you already defined. So it's up to you to namespace, use Ember CSS modules, use Ember component CSS. You need to do something, or maybe BEM, just use BEM, and everything within this engine has engine name, underscore, whatever you want. So you prevent collisions, but it's something you have to do, be aware. And also something I found that engines can be extracted into add-ons, so they can live in different repos. And the problem with this is it's a bit hard to test, because this engine depends on a store, and this store has to have these models. So when you extract this engine into an add-on, your dummy app has to have this configuration and pass the store to the engine. And your dummy app also has to have the models you need from within this engine in order to work, with the same dependencies, computer properties, and everything. So what I found that is the way to go is you need to kind of create an engine that contains the models of your application, and you include this, not an engine, sorry, an add-on that includes your models. So your models can be shared between many projects. That's the only workaround I found. If your engine depends on the models having some specific values or some specific computer properties or some behavior. And the same with any other component that happens to be shared, you need to extract it to an add-on and make it a dependency. That's the quirk that I found. That's everything I have. And if there is any question about engines and I know the answer, I will try to satisfy your curiosity. I think this is streaming, hopefully. Yes, stop it. So let's open the live stream in YouTube. What is it?
You are even watched from Dubai.
Sorry?
You are watched by someone from Dubai. Right?
Dubai, okay,
Yes.
that's nice. Let's go to YouTube.
You track the IP address.
No.
My channel should be live still. Yes. I think there is a... Okay.
What a nice day.
Actually, people was speaking to me and I wasn't aware. Okay.
In any case, guys, if somebody wants pizza, in the kitchen.
Yes. And if someone has a question or someone online has a question, I try to answer. Nobody here?
I think bring them here. Is it?
Bring it?
Please. Yeah, I'll bring them here.
Okay,
yeah, that's fine.
perfect.
The infinite loops, huh?
Ah, yes. I found that writing engines, it's pretty pleasant. You have this sense of control because your engine is so isolated from the rest that you have this idea that I could actually move this somewhere else and it will continue to work because I know for sure where the boundaries of this are. Okay, we're going to have lunch.
Lunch.
Hi. Hi everyone. I hope you enjoy. See ya.
It always works this way though, right?
Shared components